The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. That is Ben Remington.
Hello.
We are coming back better late than ever with this Minnesota Wild Vancouver Canucks series preview. We're just actually trying to get acclimated to 9:30 p.m. Start times. So that's why we're bringing this late. Ben, are you enjoying the return to play from the NHL so far? Have you watched any, if any, yet?
I've watched approximately 45 seconds of it since I just changed the channel. Turns out selling a house is a lot of work.
Gotcha. I do not have to sell a house, so I've been taking this all in. And I everything's been all right. No complaints. My one complaint is the broadcasters having video feeds that are on point with what we, the fans, see. So they're very delayed in announcing these games. So it's a kind of a nitpicky thing of mine, but otherwise, I've been pleasantly surprised with what the NHL has put on. I guess so. That's what I think so far.
Okay, you'd think there'd be a way to, and then maybe they'll fix this, but to delay the feed ever so slightly. You think that would probably work?
Yeah, you'd think they would have quicker feed than what you usually have. For the broadcasters, and there's already a 5-second delay that the TV imposes for profanity, which I don't care for.
Yeah.
I don't know. And apparently the whole ice feed is complete garbage that the broadcasters get to use. So
really,
apparently. This is from the Russo podcast. Apparently, it's just a camera that sits up in the balcony that doesn't zoom in at all, so you can't even tell what players are.
I suppose.
So that's yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah. So, this is our Minnesota Wild preview with the Vancouver Canucks. A play-in series to get into the round of 16, a 5-game play-in series, different from the 7-game series that we're previously accustomed to. However, once teams make it into the round of 16, then it goes back to regular old 7-game series. But what are your initial thoughts coming into this 5-game series with the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, we've talked about it a couple of times now, most notably last week's show, and I feel like the Canucks are about as good of a matchup as the Wild could hope for. I mean, sure, it would be better if they played like the Canadiens, for instance, yes, but I feel like the Wild do match up fairly well with the Canucks. The Canucks are, kind of they're a little bit ripe for the picking as far as the Wild matching up with them. You did a series on every game that they played against them so far this season, and it seems like that's a decent matchup. So I think as a Wild fan, I think you have to be relatively happy. Obviously, the start time of the games sucks, but I think that, if you're going to draw one of the top 8 teams in the West, I think Vancouver was probably the best for the Wild specifically.
Yeah, I'm weirdly optimistic about the Wild in this series. I know that's not something we often say on this podcast, to have optimism about the Wild. In fact, if you read zone coverage on Friday, you would see that I was the only one on the staff to pick the Minnesota Wild to actually win the series.
Really?
Yeah, I was surprised myself
Well,
because I'm usually the negative Nilly. But yeah, I was the only one that decided to pick the Wild, and I actually feel pretty confident in that pick. Just on the periphery, we've beat this really like a dead horse. That the key for the Wild in this series is coming down to goaltending, whether they get decent amount of goaltending or not.
mhm.
I have wrote this as well ad nauseum throughout the pause. And even yesterday, I also wrote that Devin Dubnyk should be the starting goalie on Wednesday. Or from Wednesday's game, Devin Dubnyk should be the starting goaltender in Sunday's game one because
Really?
he was far and away the better goaltender against the Avalanche on Wednesday.
Okay.
And just citing different examples as a non-goalie whisperer, it just looked like he was tracking the puck way better, was better on his movements, his angles, and in a short series like that, you kind of have to go with the hot hand. You can't afford to go with Alex Stalock, who probably earned that nod, but if he gets off to a slow start, then that's not something you can easily recover from.
Right. Yeah, I would tend to agree. It's a really tough spot for Dean Evason for sure because Dubnyk was very much the established starter coming into the season. Alex Stalock, didn't start great, but certainly finished fairly well as far as the regular season goes. But now, all bets are off. And like you said, you have one exhibition game against Colorado to go off of to make the most important decision of your season. And that's tough because, every playoff series does come down to goaltending. Ultimately, they almost all of them do. But, I feel like, to your point, especially this series, because the Wild are a very good team defensively. They have a little bit of offensive punch if Kevin Fiala can stay at the level that he was at. And Vancouver, was susceptible. They weren't a great defensive team this season. And so there are, advantages the Wild can take care of. They absolutely positively need to be good goaltending. And I do not envy Dean Evason because that is a tough call for sure.
Yeah. And I lost my train of thought.
I actually did a little bit of digging. Jacob Markstrom, the Canucks goaltender, had a decent season. He was kind of middle in the pack in a lot of categories. But in the final month of the regular season, he actually played very well, much like Alex Stalock. But Markstrom was even better. He was, I want to say, a top 5-ish goalie in the NHL in terms of save percentage versus expected, thanks to evolvinghockey.com. So you got to kind of hope that if Stalock had a bucket of ice water dumped on him due to this pause, you really kind of hope that Markstrom had the same thing because he was playing very well in the last month of the season. So it's going to come down to if he is staying at that level or if he cooled down, a la maybe Alex Stalock cooling down as well. So, and same thing goes for Devin Dubnyk in the complete opposite realm. I mean, he was awful. He was terrible, literally statistically one of the worst goaltenders in the NHL all season long. So, maybe this pause was the reset that he needed. Certainly he was going through a lot of things, some personal issues with his wife's health that were very unfortunate and undoubtedly in the back of his mind. So maybe the pause has allowed him to take a step back and and refocus on his game a little bit, and maybe it's better off for him. So we won't know. We won't know until Sunday night.
The goals saved versus expectation that you referenced. Jacob Markstrom is 9th best in the NHL among goaltenders.
Yeah.
Minimum of 2,000 minutes played this season,
Sure.
which is a very good air to be in. So, and
I believe in the last month he was top 5.
yeah, and you look at the flip side of that from the season, and you've got the Wild goaltenders in the bottom 10. So
yeah,
that,
very bad.
I hate to be that guy and say it's absolutely going to come down to goaltending, but
It's the playoffs. It always does.
It is absolutely going to come down to goaltending, and we did a roundtable discussion also this last week on Zone Coverage about just this series in general. And one of the questions that was posed to the staff was, say the Wild can get by the Canucks, like, can they make a run, or is this just a kind of win and that's probably it for them? And I was a little more negative. I said, say they get by the Canucks, then that's probably going to be it for them, because I not really big on any of the 4 teams that they would get stacked up against. But
yeah,
I cited in there, you never know. If you get a hot goaltender, anything is possible, but I wouldn't expect that. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Looking at, I don't know how much digging you've done in Vancouver. What is the biggest obstacle besides goaltending that the Wild have to overcome from the Canucks side?
Well, it's got to be Elias Peterson. There's really, Brock Besser is a very good player, and we certainly are painfully aware of how good he is. But Peterson is at a whole different level, and really shutting him down has got to be a huge priority for the Wild. If you can, and that's what I think the key. If you can shut him down, I think, if you really, really shut him down, I think Vancouver is, Brock Besser's nice, but I think Vancouver is a very beatable team without very much contribution from Pedersen. So that's definitely number 2 on the list, other than goaltending, I think is, and the same goes for kind of, I think, for Vancouver, from Vancouver's perspective. Fiala is probably that guy, because he was as good as anybody in the NHL. Really, really as good as anybody in the NHL in the last month or so of the season. So I think, it's goaltending, number 1, but number 2 is shutting down the other team's star. And that goes dually for the Wild and for the Canucks. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. And obviously they're still doing home team, or designated home team gets last change and all that jazz. But it'll come down to kind of a coaching thing, where if one team is able to shut down the other team's star, in addition to the goaltending, that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, and just to tag on with that, I would also add in Elias Pettersson. The Wild did a pretty good job in the 2 games he played against him this season of shutting him down. He was still a presence, obviously, in the offensive side, but only 1 point, which is something they'll have to do again. But JT Miller was just an unstoppable force in the 3 regular season games these teams played. He had 5 points, and he obviously had chances that could have pushed that up to 7 or 8 even if they had been put in the back of the net. And also Quinn Hughes, who was pretty dynamic in the last couple games these 2 teams played, and obviously a candidate for the Rookie of the Year. Those would be my 2 votes in addition to Elias Pettersson. The Canucks are a very top-heavy team, and this is something that probably should have looked at a little bit more in depth. But the Canucks, they come at you with two golden offensive lines, and then they've got a decent defensive pairing. But once you start getting into the bottom six and their bottom two defensive pairs, this is where the Wild have to make up the ground and potentially win. This is where their series is going to get won. I feel the Wild are a deeper team. They obviously need more contributions from some bottom six players than what we maybe saw from Wednesday, although that is an exhibition against the Avalanche, so take that with a grain of salt. But you need those guys in the bottom six to absolutely be better than their counterparts in Vancouver. And if the Wild can't exploit that depth, then it's probably going to be a shorter series than not. And also on the defensive side, Minnesota equally, or just obviously the better defensive team, as I believe they were the second best team in the league in terms of expected goals against, which just further goes to show how abysmal their goaltending was. So defense should still be good. It took a good 5 minutes on Wednesday for the defense to shake that rust, as we saw 2 Avalanche goals in that time just off of defensive mistakes. But the Wild can stick to their defensive prowess and have guys like Ryan Hartman, Ryan Donato, Joel Erikssonek, Jordan Greenway, Luke Cunnin. These guys who are going to be in the bottom six. If they can contribute some points, then that absolutely is where Minnesota is going to win the series, in addition to goaltending, of course.
Right. And to further your point on the expected goals, one thing I did look up is there's an over-under for that on Evolving Wild, and the Wild were actually 6th in the entire NHL in over-under on expected goals. So they were very much on the good side of the ledger. Obviously, that's very much helped by, as you mentioned, the second best team in the league and allowing expected goals, but they did enough offensively to be a net positive on expected goals and top 6 in the league, which is that's saying something. The Canucks, meanwhile, I believe, if I remember correctly, were around 13th or 16th. They were very middle of the pack, and they were a net negative on expected goals, barely, but they were still a net negative. So, the game on the ice, goaltending aside, the Wild seems like they do have an advantage, and I think you're right that depth is a huge part of that. The depth that the Wild have has always been fairly good. Since kind of the Preezy Suter era started, they've managed to have a decent bottom six even without that killer first line that we're talking about with Vancouver. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I feel like this whole thing, it predicting the playoffs in any year feels like a complete crapshoot. And then you have these playoffs where it's not just playoffs, but you have a preliminary round, a 5-game series. And, oh, by the way, they haven't played any hockey at all in 4 months.
Right.
And so, this is uncharted territory layered on top of uncharted territory as far as trying to guess what is going to happen and who's going to play well.
Right. You're shoveling them right into the playoffs with one exhibition game. And
right,
as we've seen already early Saturday through the games, the teams are a bit sloppy, a lot of penalties, a lot of bad man advantage opportunities. So it's stuff they probably will iron out by the time they get to the actual round of 16. But for the play-in series, it's going to be absolutely chaotic, sloppy hockey.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. That's as ugly as preseason hockey is, and obviously not a lot of stars playing preseason hockey, but preseason hockey can be pretty tough to watch, and unfortunately that might be what the preliminary round kind of looks like. But that could be an advantage if a team like the Wild, who has decent depth, can pull it together quicker than other teams. That's going to be the name of the game, the preliminary round. So
yeah. From the Wild standpoint, is there, obviously besides goaltending again, is there a player or two you are kind of keeping your eye on as this player needs to be exceptional in this series?
Well, I think you have to look towards Kevin Fiala and to keep doing what he was doing for the last month of this season, roughly. I mean, he really was what made – he was really the straw that stirred the drink for the Minnesota Wild. And that's no knock on Zach Parise and obviously the fantastic job that all the defensive players do. I mean, Jonas Brodin was having a great season. Spurgeon is always top-notch. Suter plays well. But Kevin Fiala is the guy. And there's a lot of times in the playoffs, where goaltending wins playoffs, 9 times out of 10. But there's a lot of times in the playoffs where you have to lean on your guy. And your guy has to score a lot of big goals. And, it could be that kind of thing for the Wild. Not to say that their depth couldn't win this series, because it very well could, as we mentioned. But Kevin Fiala taking advantage of maybe some good matchups here and there because Vancouver doesn't have that defensive depth is going to be a huge step towards winning this series.
Yeah. Fiala obviously is going to be a huge part of that. I kind of look at a guy like Zach Parise. Obviously, this kind of series seems to be in his wheelhouse, where the Wild are going against a good goaltender and Jacob Markstrom, and they will need some front of the net greasy goals types, and that's very much where Zach Parise has made his money through his career. So obviously looking at him, and actually Tony Abbott wrote a piece on Friday at Zone Coverage about Zach Parise and his playoff history and how he will undoubtedly be a factor in this series as well. So my point kind of piggybacks off what Tony was talking about on Friday. And also, from a defensive standpoint, I look at Matt Dumba, who did not have a good 2019-20 season coming off that injury last year. But now he's essentially been given an off season to get back into even fuller health. And, I really had to like what you saw from him just on Wednesday alone on the exhibition. Looked like a totally different player. So having him more active offensively from the blue line will be very key for Minnesota. And if they can get him going even on the power play, just on the power play, would be very preferred. So those are the players I kind of keep in mind in addition to your, like I mentioned before, the bottom 6 guys and, even a Marcus Foligno. This series also kind of screams Marcus Foligno, with the more grinder, agitator players that the Canucks have in their bottom 6, not necessarily going with the skilled guys, but the agitator types. So Marcus Foligno also to be front and center in this series.
Yeah, he could play a role, similar to what we saw in the Colorado series in 2014, where Eric Haula was stapled to Nate McKinnon. And especially at home, Haula was able to shut McKinnon down. And, I mean, that won the series for the Wild, hands down. It'll be interesting to see if maybe, as good as Foligno is defensively, if he draws, Pettersson's line often and they deploy him in that manner. And not to say that they have to. Certainly the Wild have many other lines. Joel Eriksson Ek is a guy that is, very good defensively to the point where he's almost like an agitator without all of the crap talking and without all of the extraneous bull crap that you don't like from agitators. But he just is that type of player that plays such an intense defensive game that he gets under people's skin. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle, the top lines of Vancouver and who they can assign to handle them.
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously you've been hip deep in all kinds of life stuff this week.
Right.
I don't know if you caught my article earlier in the week. I talked about from a coaching aspect, Dean Evison coming into this series, and he's really in a win-win situation for the Wild, where Wild win the series and he'll get heaps of praise for being able to guide them through the pandemic and this series and into the actual playoffs, which wasn't something that maybe they could have done in the regular season under normal circumstances. And then say they lose, then he's, nobody's blaming him, and the fans are ecstatic because the team has a chance at the draft lottery. And, the problems that the team had already, it's not going to be put on him. It's going to go to Bill Guerin, who's got to fix that. So
Right.
I feel like just from a coaching aspect, it's even between Dean Evison and Travis Green, who I don't really know what to expect from, but I feel like with a more clean mind like Evison will have, knowing, like, say he knows going in this is a win-win for him, like that just got to make a slight advantage for Minnesota in the coaching aspect, especially seeing the results the Wild had after Evison was named the head coach.
Yeah, it's really kind of playing with house money a little bit. I think, as a caveat to your article, I think the one situation that Evison could be, could not be win-win, and we talked about this earlier, is choosing a goaltender. And so let's say he comes out with Dubnyk, and Dubnyk gets worked in the first 2 games, and then he makes the switch to Stalock, and Stalock plays well, and they end up losing the series. Then I could see, a little bit of shade cast on Dean Evison. But to your point, it's going to be awfully hard to, because the expectations, I feel like, for this Wild team are relatively low, just because they're the 10th seed in the playoffs in this preliminary round. Like, they're not super high expectations. People would be ecstatic if they won. If they lose, like you said, a lot of fans are going to be ecstatic as well, because they're going to enter the draft lottery. So I think the one caveat would be the making a wrong goaltending decision. But otherwise, yeah, I think he's playing with house money, and it's got to be so much nicer. And also, they removed the interim tag. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge part of him playing with house money, is that he's not coaching for his career right now, which we thought he would be up until, was it 2 weeks ago? We thought he would be absolutely coaching for his head coaching career right now, and he's not. And so that has got to be, he's got to be about as loose as you can be going into your first ever playoff series, which obviously I'm sure there's plenty of nerves there, but yeah, I think you're right. I think house money is that definitely favors the Wild, even though his relative inexperience might not.
Right. And this is such a weird series to try and predict. As you mentioned, we've had 5 months away from hockey, 2 weeks of training camp and 1 little exhibition game to get these players back and warmed up. And the consensus among hockey writers is, this is going to be the Canucks series. But if you had to make a prediction, what would you predict?
That's a great question. I haven't really given it a whole lot of thought. I do think that the Wild can win this series. I do think that they, again, it's all on goaltending, and it's really tough to bet against Markstrom, who had a good year this year. So, yeah, man, that's a tough call, but I'll go with the Wild in 5, just because I think they do match up well. I think that, like you mentioned, they have been able to shut down Elias Pettersson, and I think that they can get good enough goaltending. They don't need, when we talk about goaltending settling this series, they don't need elite goaltending. They don't need Jake Allen pulling a rabbit out of a hat. They literally just need kind of league average goaltending, and they're so good at limiting chances from there. If the Wild got league average goaltending this season, they'd probably be in the top 4 in the West. Like that's how good they've played this year, aside from between the pipes. So I'll take the Wild in 5, just because I think they can get in a short sample, hopefully they can get league average goaltending.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I picked on the site this last week was the Wild at 5. I said the Wild come out a little slow. They lose 2 out of the first 3, but they pull it together and they win the last 2 to send them on to the round of 16 again, and they'll face either St. Louis, Dallas, Vegas, and I'm missing another team.
Colorado, I
think. Yeah, that sounds right. So, again, not too enthused about the Wild in the round of 16, but
no.
I think when it comes to this series, I think there's just going to be a little bit more randomness to it, and I think the Wild somehow pull it out, given the little bit more experience that they have on the roster. I think that's something you don't talk about it a lot. At least we don't talk about it a lot. We try to use a little bit more statistical based analysis, but I think in a random playoff series like this, having guys with some more experience will come into play over the youth of the Canucks who don't have as much as Minnesota does.
Not to mention, we haven't addressed this yet, but winning the preliminary round, getting into the first round of the actual playoffs, and getting the break speed off of them, but also missing out on the draft lottery is so very wild that it hurts. And so I don't know why more people aren't expecting that, but they should probably expect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, the Wild winning and then later finding out that had they lost, they would have been the recipient of
Oh, yeah, that's totally happening.
Yep. You know it's happening.
Yep, it's happening.
Any other thoughts on this series? I know I guess I'll let you think of something, and I'm going to whine for a few minutes.
Sure.
This was something Russo mentioned on his pod briefly, but 9:30 start times for a team in the Central Time Zone, and you have way more control over when you start these games.
Right.
It's such a bother to me. And these are projected start times. If there's a game in front of the Wild that goes to 1, 2, 3 overtimes, that's going to push the Wild start even more. And so it's such a bother that the NHL always does this seemingly to the Wild. And I think the Predators too are very much in this category as well, but I don't think they're getting start times like these in the first round or the preliminary round. But I don't know. It's such a slap in the face to the fans here that they've got to sit up and wait until 9:30 or potentially later for a start time and whatever. But it's the NHL, so they can do whatever they want.
Basically, yeah. I don't know. It just at least I guess they're playing a West Coast team, so it sort of makes sense for one team.
Right.
Like this is better than the Wild and Blues playing at 8:30 at night. But I'm with you. It still is just I don't know. It's still infuriating because it's like I have to get up for work at 4:00 in the morning on Monday morning, and so watching any, let alone all, of the Wild playoff game is going to be a pretty tough draw for me. So I don't know. It seems like the NHL doesn't consider that sometimes. Like, I don't know. It seems like there could be games that start earlier in the day, and they'd be totally fine. Like, who doesn't want to watch a hockey game at 2:00? And oh, by the way, it's not like half of our workforce isn't at home anyway right now.
Right.
it seems to me like that would be the way to go. And if we could at least get a game at 8 p.m. at night, that's a huge difference than a game that doesn't start until 9:30, potentially later. I mean, it is. It's the NHL. I don't know if they're catering to one of the markets more than the other, but it just seems like they could do a lot better job.
I guess at least if you're going to play to the home team, I guess, then sure, like you have Vancouver having their home start times for like 9:30, but then when you get to like game 3 and 4,
right,
then those should be more favored towards Minnesota, who would have been the home team.
Right. Yep. Yeah, agreed. I don't know why that's so difficult to do, but it really seems like a disservice. And not that this was targeting the Wild specifically. I don't think the NHL is trying to hurt the Minneapolis-St. Paul television market, which is a great market for them, by the way.
Right.
I don't know. It just seems like they lined up the games and said, "Oh yeah, it looks good, sounds good," forgetting that, yes, you have a couple of teams on the West Coast, but it's just a couple of teams, and you don't need to. Yeah, I'm sure they'll probably continue it on in the next round too, where you're going to have 9:30 p.m. start times for teams that aren't on the West Coast, aren't in Pacific time, and it's just like this happens every playoff season, and it's just downright silly unless you've got two California teams playing each other or two Pacific Coast teams playing each other. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have any games starting after 8 p.m. local time.
Yeah. No, it's just, I don't know. But I guess given how the NHL has handled all of this by comparison to another major professional sports league, I guess that's, it kind of falls into the category beggars can't be choosers.
It's true.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna push that argument right now on this podcast. I guess it's we've kind of covered our basis with the Wild Canucks series. Any other series around the league kind of pick your particular interests? I know you've been kind of detached from what's been going on right now, but is there any other series that you kind of look at and go, yeah, I got to see that?
No, I haven't given it much thought, to be honest. I'm just happy to see hockey back. But I think that, and we talked about this, I believe, before the show started, a couple of the analytics type folks online picked the Montreal Canadiens to upset Pittsburgh. And so I think that makes for a very interesting, you've got an upset of a 12th seed in the playoffs, which has literally not been a thing before. So that makes this series that we're currently watching right now, that makes this series kind of interesting, I think. I think that just seeing a 12th seed, possibly somebody who's 12th in their conference, possibly making into the actual bona fide NHL playoffs, I think that's interesting. And certainly Pittsburgh has had some injury problems that have come and gone, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out because the analytic numbers, for whatever reason, seem to favor the Canadiens.
And it's also funny you point out this 5-12 series between Pittsburgh and Montreal when we watched the other 5-12 this afternoon. The Chicago Blackhawks actually absolutely taking a blowtorch to Mike Smith and the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
Which would be very peak Edmonton for them to be the 5th seed, the team literally that was just on the outside looking in at the being in that round robin for the 4 best teams, and they don't advance into the round of 16 because they get upset by the 12th seed.
I think we can all agree that whoever loses that series between Edmonton and Chicago is undoubtedly winning the draft lottery.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
I feel it in my bones.
It just feels like a slam dunk, empty netter, whatever analogy you want to use.
Sure.
Yeah, The other series that kind of intrigued me is what was I watching today? New York and who was it? Carolina. That's the one.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was that was intriguing. Although just watching Carolina kind of steamroll the Rangers systematically, kind of deflated my heavy interest in that series. Although that does reinforce my Artemi Panarin is absolutely the most valuable player argument.
Right.
Um, but the other one I'm really fascinated with is Columbus and Toronto, and I feel like you kind of have this Maple Leafs team that absolutely should be moving on against this Columbus team that they had a lot of change from last year. They still were, you know, good enough to be a part of the tournament. They were battling for a playoff spot even when the season paused,
Mhm.
and I feel like going in they have absolutely no pressure on them, and
Right.
that's a very dangerous place to be for the team that's playing against you in Toronto. So
Mhm.
I'm very interested in that series just from the pressure aspect. And it would be absolutely dynamite to see Columbus move on just to watch the meltdowns. So,
Well, we saw what happened when Columbus had no pressure on them whatsoever last season.
right.
Right in the first round, they mopped the floor with one of the best teams almost in NHL history. From a statistical standpoint. So, yeah, I mean, no Panarin, no Bobrovsky, but it didn't really seem to matter. No Duchesne either. Didn't really seem to matter for Columbus. You don't want to give too much credit to Torts, but I guess you have to give some credit to Torts because that team is certainly in a decent position. And man, yeah, you're right. The meltdowns from the Maple Leafs and Leafs Twitter by extension.
Just from the Toronto media.
Oh my God, if they lose that series to a team, a Blue Jackets team without the aforementioned stars, wow, that's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah. Yeah. Any last thoughts? Otherwise, I think we can call it a show.
No, it was good. Partly my fault this week that we're getting a show out so late. It is a busy life right now, and as I mentioned, selling your house is not fun. 3 out of 10 would not recommend. So yeah. Apologies for that, but hopefully you can still find time on your Sunday or even Monday after Game 1 to enjoy this otherwise fine podcast. But just glad hockey's back. I mean, watching real, live, genuine hockey on my television right now is it's great. And obviously this coronavirus thing has been terrible and for a lot of reasons. But missing sports was one of the things that was obviously very first and foremost for me and Giles too, I'm sure. So having all of the sports, almost literally all of the sports happening at once, is a lot of fun, and it should be, at least if we're still kind of quarantined and still kind of social distancing and all that jazz. At least if we have all these sports to watch, I think we can maybe get by a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife's already sick of sports, so
Yeah, mine will probably not watch a single minute because she's been sick of sports since we got married. So
I use the good line of, well, you married this, so it's your own fault, and I'm not taking sports for granted anymore after not having it for 5 months. So
right? Yeah, no kidding.
yeah. Oh, she's in the room glaring at me right now. What a surprise. Yeah, I would, my last thoughts are I would encourage everyone to check out zonecoverage.com, or actually our new vertical for wild coverage now is 10krinks.com, which we've just launched here in the last week. Our Twitter is at 10krinksmn. We're going to be live tweeting the games from there. promoting all of our podcasts and articles and whatnot. We'll have more to that in the coming week as we're really throwing this all together as we go along. But I would encourage you to check that out. And really, in the last week, we piped out so much hashtag content at 10K Rinks that you can literally fill your Sunday by reading it as you gear up for the late start for the Minnesota Wild in their playoffs. And a lot of good content, if I may be so bold to say. So do check that out. But I hopefully we'll be back a little bit later in the week to kind of reflect on at least the first couple games in this series, and we'll kind of take it as we go here, because this is all a very, very fluid return to play tournament. So it's there's not going to be a whole big schedule from us as to when we'll jump on, but we'll do what we can. So that can do it for us. You can follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Remington. He loves to right now be yelling about MAGA chuds, talking about how hockey players can't kneel. You can follow me on Twitter at Giles Farrell, yelling at morons who called Matt Dumba a douche today. You can follow this otherwise fine podcast on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast, where we just yell at Dave Schwartz about his jersey takes.
Yes.
At 10K Rinks MN on Twitter, at Zone Coverage MN on Twitter. And again, 10krinks.com for all your Minnesota Wild coverage. And also all of the podcasts between us writers will be pushed to that site as well. So in addition to this podcast, we'll have the Locked On Wild podcast with Tony and Joe, which if you haven't checked them out, they've been previewing this series this week. Yeah, I think we got it all. If you like this show, and I'm not sure why, we're just otherwise fine, you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube, which we did our live Zoom for this episode. So you can watch us switch backgrounds at nausea during this show. I've had to look at Frank for the last 20 minutes, and I must say, very adorable. So yeah, that will wrap it up for us this week, and we will talk to you a little bit later.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.